If you're invested in an index fund like SPY or VOO, you probably think you're invested in the entire S&P 500, all 500 companies, but you're really just investing in the Magnificent Seven. That's Google, Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple, and the rest of them. The problem is it's more like an iceberg. You see just the top of the thing, but there is so much more of the market that you do not own, that you truly don't even get the advantage of, because those 7 companies are soaking up so much value. What is going on here, and where is the money actually moving? In 2025 and currently in 2026, there are indexes and sectors that are doing way better than the S&P 500, and it is easy for you to access it, just like it is the other half of the iceberg. So what sectors are they, and which ones should you consider buying? Let's go ahead and break it down. Now, I brought this up before that good investors look at the stock market in sectors. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong about just investing in the S&P 500, but it does have risk because 40% of the entire stock market is not just tech stocks. There are 11 different sectors, but the entire US economy, you have large companies, small companies, you've got industrial companies, you do have tech companies. We've got a bunch of different areas of the stock market, but you're not necessarily accessing them all. At any given time, there are some that are doing incredibly well, but what is working right now? So I want you to consider these stats. The S&P 500 in 2025 was up 17%. Currently, at the time I'm doing this video, year to date, so January to now, and right now I'm doing this on July 27th, all right, the stock market is up 10%, okay? Here's what I want you to consider, and all of these stats are according to Bloomberg. Emerging markets, all right, this is according to Morgan Stanley, their index. These are smaller countries on the rise. The emerging markets, their index was up 24% in 2025, and year to date, up 31%. That's an area that you may want to consider. Now, before I even found this stat, I told y'all last week that EEM, right, the emerging market index, was one of the best places to invest. I'm just telling you straight up, all right? I've already invested. When I told y'all these are one of the places that I'm investing, I told y'all that, all right? I put my own money into it before I even found out that this is one of the best places for the year, okay? EEM is just one of those areas, but emerging markets, I said this last year as well. You can check that video out, that investing internationally makes a whole lot of sense, because I talked about South Korea doing incredibly well too. Here we go. All right. Now, I wouldn't necessarily consider South Korea an emerging market, but you guys get the point. Investing internationally makes a whole lot of sense. The next one is small cap companies. Now, the best, most tangible way that I like to classify what is a small cap company, I'll put the exact definition. Every company, whether it's Bloomberg or Morgan Stanley, they kind of have their own definitions. But in either case, I like to say if McDonald's is a blue chip company, a large company, you know what McDonald's is. They're on every corner. Five Guys, it's not all that big, right? You don't see them everywhere. It's kind of niche when you do see them. So that is a large company, multinational company in McDonald's, small cap company, a Five Guys, right? You kind of get the difference here. Small cap companies are having one of their best years in decades. The Wall Street Journal came out with a story to talk about how well small cap companies are doing. Small cap companies, again, are on a run. They're up 20%. They were up 20% in 2025 compared to just 17% for the S&P 500. Okay, that was last year. And now they're up 16.9% in 2026, year to date. Okay, so they're up 16.9% now compared to just 10% for the S&P 500. So this is a continued run for small cap companies, for lack of a better term. People are looking for value. We know that the larger companies, we know what those are. People are moving down the chain for those smaller companies that have opportunities to grow. This is the area you want to move your money to. Emerging markets and small cap stocks. But before moving your money to anything, you may want to move to buildingbread.com/news to go to my free newsletter where I break down all of this stuff for free every 2 weeks. You will absolutely enjoy it. I broke down the American dream just last week, and rather it is completely broken. So you absolutely want to check that out. Again, buildabread.com/news. I will also pin that in the comments below. But definitely support the channel. I enjoy doing those newsletters. Those are quite fun. All right. Now, where should you invest in terms, or where should you consider rather investing in terms of ETFs, and then what are the pros and cons? Now, some of these are also going to include larger companies, and again, I'll tell you the pros and cons. And yes, some of these will include tech too. It's, if you're talking about an ETF, exchange traded fund, it's a little undeniable. I unfortunately don't build these ETFs. In either case though, VGT, this is the Vanguard Information Technology Fund, up 21% in the last 6 months, up 34% over the last year. Now, yes, the first few here, you're going to see a lot of familiar names. The good piece, one, yes, it's going to be in tech. Okay, this is the name. Okay, I've already mentioned that like twice now. But there are going to be a lot of medium to smaller tech names that you're not going to see in the S&P 500. That's going to help you out a lot more. The fact that it's tech in and of itself is usually going to be a bit of a boost. But again, once you start to scroll down the list, you're going to see some names that you usually do not see as often, beyond like the AMD and a few of the others. Before we get into the, more international small cap stuff, I do have one more tech fund for you. This is the IXN Global Tech Shares. Okay, so IXN is the stock symbol. The name of it is the Global Tech Shares. In either case, though, this one is fared a bit better. This is up 27% in the last 6 months, up 43% over last year. If you want to compare the two of these, the Vanguard one versus the iShares one, look at them, see how they are comprised. I've done a video, this was several years ago, on how to compare like what's in each of these, just to see like, do they overlap, what's in them, what makes them so different. If you want me to do a comparison video, let me know in the comments. If you think it's helpful, we can do that. We can definitely do that. So let me know in the comments if you want me to do that, and if you think that is valuable. Now here's where we get to the international piece here. Now I have talked about this. EEM is the one we had discussed. I'm not going to go too deep here, but it's up 10% in the last 6 months, up 32% over the last year. Now there are some risk. There's risk with every investment, but there are some risks with investing internationally. But again, investing internationally, but especially in emerging markets, has been one of the best sectors last year, and definitely one of the best sectors so far this year. Now, because it's international, I'm still sticking with my 5% rule. This is what I've done for my portfolio. I'm not going to YOLO and put 10, 15, or even 20% of my own money into an emerging market fund. That's just me. This was a global world fund, I would feel more comfortable putting 10 or 15%, but because it's emerging market, it is specifically taking on more risk. Okay, I'm telling you that up front. You got to assess your own risk profile when you are doing anything that is more small cap, more emerging markets, anything like that. But if it is specifically emerging markets or something of that nature, you're taking on more risk. It's emerging for a reason. All right, so do know that up front. IJR, this one is the small cap fund that you want to check out. Now, this is not the only one that's out there, right? But it's up 13% in the last 6 months, up 28% over the last year. Now, similar, but not exactly the same, similar with the emerging markets, you are taking on more risk here. Okay, you're taking on more risk with a small cap fund. Should you put, 5% or more? Again, I probably wouldn't go double digits. Or to be exact, probably wouldn't go more than 10, just because, again, this is more my personal risk profile. But again, you are taking more risk. McDonald's is unlikely to go bankrupt. A food truck is. Just there's your risk comparison there. Okay, just to throw it out there. Now, what are the pros and cons with investing with some of these sectors versus investing with something like the S&P 500? First, you can combine these. If you go back to the video where I showed you exactly what I'm investing in and why, you can do layers of these. So if I want to do 70% of my money in the S&P 500 and split the rest of these and have them in different tiers, you can absolutely do that. That is totally fine. How much is totally up to you and what you're trying to do. Okay, you can expose yourself to different things, because if the S&P 500 is mostly large companies and most of that is just the Magnificent Seven, then you don't have smaller companies. So that makes sense to have small cap. It makes sense to have emerging markets because it's not already going to be in the S&P 500. So it makes sense to kind of layer those things together. So it's okay if you mix these with the S&P 500. So that's number one. So you can absolutely do that. But pros and cons. Let's start off with the cons. We'll end with the pros. The cons, you don't control what's in these ETFs. So what may have worked in 2025 because it had a certain stock, maybe it was small cap and now it's a big company and they took it out. Maybe it was a small company and they took it out because it got big. You don't necessarily control that. These are things that you might have to consider. How often does it happen? Yeah. Right? Something like an emerging market, those are things you may not understand because it's not local per se. And the same thing with small cap, it just could be a lot more risky. Also, right now we're going through earnings season. Tech companies, they could be going through it for the next 2 weeks or so. Those are things you can't necessarily control, and they're not necessarily like individual stocks because they are grouped all together. Also, on the pro side, it's not an individual stock, so it may not take a 5 or 10% dip just because it had a bad day. It's several hundred stocks grouped together. You may not feel the burn in the exact same way. It can go either way, right? It can absolutely go either way. So there's the pro and the con of doing it. But I think the best thing is consider layering some of these, right? That way you don't have to go and find 12 or 15 different stocks. However, if you are considering an individual stock or you just want to see exactly what I invested in and the logic behind it, then you want to check out this video right here.